Hello, everyone. Kevin Allen is back.
I'm back. I'm here physically, but mentally, I'm halfway between Korea and here.
This is the thing, Kev. I thought it was a big ordeal for me to drive up and back to Toronto 10 times in the less than 3 weeks. That's nothing compared to what you've gone through in terms of flying halfway across the world and back in the last 2.5 weeks.
Well, and the big thing for me is to jump right back in. You know, the one thing I do love, though, is now there was a long bus ride. I basically started my day getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning, Korean time, to get a 3:30 bus to, drive to Seoul, to wait, to get on a plane. But when I got on the plane, I actually left at 11:15 Korean time, and I got back at 10:35 U.S. time. So I got home before I left.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that time machine.
Oh, yeah. I've always wanted to time travel, and I've now done it several times. But, by doing that, you jump right back in the trade deadline. But thankfully, all the general managers took pity on me, and they waited until the last minute to make trades. So there wasn't a lot to do, just other than, kind of staring at my computer and sending out emails and having them saying, you're probably carrying on more conversations than we are right now. So,
was anybody extra nice to you and saying, okay, I know you're not there, so I'll tell you this?
No.
No one gave you anything?
No, I never really. I heard from a couple of GMs who said they really, it was very specific, people told me. Like, the teams that everybody said were in on Carlson were in. Mm-hmm. And that was it. Like the teams that were in on Nash were in on Nash, and there was no surprises.
Right.
And if you look at the way the trade deadline played out, the contenders all did what they were supposed to do. They went out and got the one guy or the piece and everything else, and everybody else refused to pay the prices.
Well, it was funny because and Lou Lamoriello described it as, because it was known that the Leafs were in on Ryan McDonagh, and unusual for Lou, he was specific and said we were in on Ryan McDonagh, but we weren't in on Ryan McDonagh as much as Tampa was in on Ryan McDonagh. Yeah. Which that's pretty forthcoming from Lou, but
that's very forthcoming. Yeah.
Yeah, for him, that's
that actually is almost tampering. I mean, it is. You're not allowed to talk about players on other teams, so
you're not really supposed to.
But it would be silly to.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think you can. I've heard people say before that they were in on players. Yeah. I think that they can do that, but it is totally out of Lou's character for sure. To talk.
I think he wanted his fan base to know he was trying.
Maybe that's it.
What is interesting is I really did. I was amused because obviously there was, for years you've tried to make the three trade work, and nobody actually was ever going to ever do those trades because it didn't make any sense to do them. But now it does because of all the contracts. And obviously,
right? And I know I felt so justified. I was
just ahead of your time.
You weren't even here. I couldn't even talk to you about it. I was like, I wanted so many times, like, Kevin, there's another three-way trade.
We've become the NHL has become the NBA. I mean,
we did know that trades would eventually get that way because in a new cap system, in a new cap system, everybody treats it correctly. But then as time goes on, you find out which teams are the better cap teams, and the ones that aren't end up having to make those kinds of deals.
How about the nice little intrigue behind the Brassard trade? That to me was the most fun thing. So here you have Jim Rutherford, right? Who I keep writing and calling him Jeremy Rutherford whenever I write. I just cannot stop making that stupid mistake. I know Jeremy Rutherford is a writer and not.
I think Jim's too old to be on the beat at this point.
So anyway, Jim Rutherford, wants to get a guy, wants to get a center, trying to, but doesn't have a lot of cap space. Meanwhile, his friend, used to be at the Capitals, now out in Vegas, wants to keep a guy out of the Western Conference. It was an incredible little shifting of that took a lot of coordination and obviously go through right away. But it was still, that was Rutherford at his best, in my opinion. That this is you've always said, Kevin, that you've always used the term that he's like the best horse trader out there.
Oh, for sure.
This is him at his best. To pull that off, that was pretty remarkable.
I will say this: I have been told by two real good hockey, because I love that trade from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, yes.
He's always played better in the playoffs than he does in the regular season.
Yeah.
Yep.
But two people that I really, really trust as knowing the game told me they did not like that trade for them.
Really?
Oh, that's crazy. I'll tell you what. Here's something that I've been using, Kev, and I'll go back to this. The Rangers went into a Game 7 situation in Pittsburgh. Derek Brassard was one of the best players in that game, along with Lundqvist and McDonough. And so I don't think that was lost on
why didn't they like it?
Well, they didn't like it because they felt that this season Brassard has just played poorly for 25 games, and it's gone beyond being a slump, and there's concern that he's just kind of lost it. That the
I would be surprised.
The Senators have been sort of a black hole of negativity this year, so I think I'd cut them a little slack. The only thing I could see as a problem with that deal is the fact that Brassard has been a top 2 center for most of his career, especially with the Rangers and with Ottawa, and here he's being relied on being a third liner, which, I mean, depth-wise,
better for him. He really wasn't a 2. He really wasn't.
Right, but there might, Bonino was a really great fit as a 3, and maybe a guy like Bozak, who was always rumored to be going to Pittsburgh as part of a trade, would have been a better fit. But I think Brassard is pretty damn good. And the weird thing is, this sort of backfired on Vegas, this ploy to keep Brassard away from Winnipeg, because Winnipeg got a better center in the deal for Stastny. I mean, I think Stastny, if now he's playing with Ehlers and Laine, and I watched that Nashville-Winnipeg game last night, that team is loaded for bear now. I don't think it stopped Winnipeg from getting the guy that they, in the end, wanted.
But I do want to say this, and Kevin, this is something now that Vegas is in the league, and you have a team that's won 2 in a row like Pittsburgh going for a third. I think this year was so much easier for Rutherford to get what he needed at the deadline than even last year, and probably even the year before. Like now, it's almost like it looks easier for them to win a third rather than when the season started saying, well, it's going to be hard for them and everything else. Now, to me, it's like I think it'll be hard, but I also think their chances have improved dramatically.
I've gone up and down on Pittsburgh as far as this goes. Like, it seems like at first it's such a perfect move and it's going to make them win a third. But, watching them again last night and just I know that they're, they have injuries and stuff like that, but their defense isn't what it's been the last couple of years.
But it wasn't when last year.
Yeah, last year was terrible. Yeah.
Right.
But you're right. But I mean, it did pick up in the playoffs. Maybe, Ian Cole is not a small player to lose. I think, even though
he hadn't played well this season.
Yeah.
But they have Chris Letang.
Yeah, that's the thing. Here's my take on that.
Letang wasn't there.
I started down this path, but we kind of got off the rail. Let me start back where I said 2 people who I really trust told me they didn't like the trade, and they thought that basically it was because they've watched a lot of Brassard this year, and he doesn't have the same drive. And as the one guy said, what he did with the Rangers was 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And, because a lot has happened, and they just didn't like the trade, and they just didn't think that he was going to have. He said, basically they said, Jimmy believes he's going to be Bonino, and he's not Bonino. Bonino plays with more of an edge, and he can, step up when the going gets tough. Now, I like the trade. I thought it was the perfect trade for them because that third line, they need to get scoring out of that line, and Brassard is a very creative player and can play with good players. So I absolutely love that, and I'm less worried about the defense, mostly because I think last year's defense, like no one thought that defense was going to hold up last year, and they played extremely well, and they found a way to do it. And Ian Cole had, for whatever reason, kind of fallen out of favor there.
Yeah, for sure.
And it wasn't going to work. I don't know why. He just wasn't the same player, but he was a pretty vital player last season.
Yeah, and remember, Ron Hainsey, who went to Toronto as a free agent, he was there. He was on that top pairing last year. Out of necessity because Letang was out. But so they're missing 2 veteran guys.
3 guys. Daly was on.
And Daly, that's right. And Daly is
another. Yeah, this is the thing. The only person who told me they didn't like the trade didn't like it for that, didn't like it for different reasons, which is why I asked. They didn't like giving up Reeves, actually. They actually thought that Reeves was an important player to have around when you got Sidney Crosby on your team.
That was the Don Cherry perspective. He said,
okay.
Sidney Crosby,
but he doesn't play in the playoffs. He's not going to play for Pittsburgh. Stop.
That's the thing too. They had hoped he was going to play, but there was no indication that he was going to play.
Well, he'll play for Vegas.
Sure, for Vegas, he will. For Pittsburgh, he wasn't going to.
No, but I mean, he'll play for Vegas in the playoffs because the one reason that they got him is because they could match up against Anaheim or against LA, and those are big, heavy teams, and they need somebody to be a policeman.
Yeah.
All right, let's start. We already have, but you've been watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. Hello, Hockey World. This is February 28th, 2018.
I'm Michael Lagello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching the HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we have a lot of fun, like aftermath trade stuff to talk about, and then we'll get into a little bit of where this is heading from there. But we have been discussing the Brassard trade. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Carlson. The Carlson drama of the day was, it was fun for what it's worth. I mean, it was fun. It kept us on our toes the whole day. TSN kept saying it still could happen. It still could happen. It still could happen. And, the teams that were in on it, like you said, Kevin, were probably the teams that were in on it.
Well, at the end, it was only, multiple sources have told me at the end it was only one team.
Right. So it's Vegas at the end. And right. So it's Vegas.
Yeah.
And the question with that is this. And I wonder how far to the end it really went, because on TSN they were banging out like it's going right to 3 o'clock. But when they made the Tatar trade, Vegas gave up a first, a second, and a third. I thought to myself, those had to have been picks that would have been included in a Carlson trade. I mean, or that first at least would have been included in a Carlson trade. So I'm wondering.
I never had the impression that it went to the 3 o'clock. I kind of got that
on TSN. That's what they were doing. I mean, they were. I mean,
really, it seemed dead before that. I agree with you.
Yeah.
No, come on. We were on the podcast. We were saying right up to 2:55. Darren Drager was tweeting. They're still working on this.
Well, that doesn't mean his information wasn't 25 minutes old. I mean, I think at a certain point people moved it. Whoever it was moved off of Carlson because we got other things to complete that we want to complete, and we need at least 20 minutes or a half hour to get it done.
That's what I'm thinking.
We were more hopeful for McDonough. I don't remember us thinking Carlson was going to happen at 2:55. And
honestly, this was a buyer's market, and I've been saying it was a buyer's market for a month because there were so many teams selling. And if you look at some of the stuff that came out, and Russ and I talked about this yesterday, the Evander Kane deal went down basically 5 minutes before the deadline. Peter Chiarelli basically said, I got one call on Patrick Maroon, and it was 5 minutes to 3, and I did the deal. So everybody was waiting till the last minute to get these guys, and that's right. when it's a buyer's market, you can do that.
And I want to hear Kevin's opinion on this because I think it's true. Kev, it seems like Steve Yzerman, he definitely held up the Carlson market because he was interested, and he held up the Green market because he was interested, and then last minute made the deal for McDonough and seemed to kill everybody else's chances of getting the other two guys, and he got his guy. He got what he needed, and definitely stopped from other teams, I think, from getting something.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think Green's issue was more his injury, and he only had a limited market because he could control where he wanted to go, and he basically wanted to go to Washington or Tampa, and I think Washington was kind of lukewarm on all that. Right. So, and then there was the injury. Two teams requested medical, and the report says it could be reoccurring. So,
right.
I'm sorry, Kev. It was funny though because somebody asked a question of Lou Lamoriello regarding Green because there had been some rumor out there that he had blocked or used his no trade to block a trade to Toronto, and Lou says, "Well, that's not fair to ask me about that about Mike Green. We had no interest in him. He actually came out and said they had no interest. Now, I don't know if that's saving face because he doesn't want the impression out there that that somebody would block to go to the Leafs." Or he legitimately had no interest. But it's curious that the Leafs, after making a trade for Plekanec, which was basically a buying move for a team that thinks that they can contend, don't go the next step and get the defenseman that they've needed for over a year. I wrote yesterday that's Lou's second swing and a miss on a defenseman, and that's for them to be a contender. They need to get that top 4 guy. Otherwise, I don't think they're going to be a contender.
Yeah, I agree with you, but the problem was there was nobody out there except McDonough.
Yeah, except McDonough.
Yeah, don't you think too on that trade? And Russ, you probably know more about it, but Foot. Like, if I'm the Rangers, I demand Foot. Yeah. I don't know how you can make that trade.
I'll tell you why. Yeah. If you notice, the secret for everybody they picked up in these trades was 20 years old or older. What they're not telling the fans and everybody is, yes, we're retooling, but we're retooling with guys that we think are very close to the NHL. If they get Cal Foote, he's 4 or 5 years away. They didn't want to wait that long.
Maybe 2 years.
No, he's longer than 2 years. He's longer than 2 years.
Okay. It's hard to retool that way. I mean, that's
right.
I still think you got to make that. You got to make him part of the deal. Unless Eisenman said no, absolutely no.
Yeah. He did 48 hours before the deadline. It was reported. He says Cal Foote will not be included in any of these deals, just like nobody from their NHL roster would be included. But he did include Nemestikov.
Yeah, so somebody was.
I don't think they really. I mean, not that he's not a skilled player, because he is. But early in the season, there were rumors that Nemestikov was going to be dealt. Like, I think they saw him as a guy. They have plenty of players who can do what he can do.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he was going to be dealt based on whoever Cooper and Yzerman identified as guys they were going to keep. But I also think that Nemestikov has a higher ceiling than what he's been able to show in Tampa too. I think that's the part I think that's going to shock people. Same with Zibanejad. The minute Zibanejad got away from Ottawa and they threw him in a different role in that first center role, he was able to grow into that. I think Nemestikov will be able to do the same thing for the Rangers. And I think because he's got a much higher skill level than what Cooper would allow him to do, because Cooper wants him to be defensively responsible all the time. I think that's going to help him. And
another factor for Nemestikov is, I mean, just like Miller, they're both RFAs. And I have a feeling that based on the year that he's had right now, he's 44 points, 20 goals with Tampa. He could legitimately go in terms of arbitration and ask for $4 million and probably get it. So I don't think they wanted to pay that much for him.
Well, an underrated aspect of that trade is that Miller is 38 pounds heavier than Nemestikov. I'm just putting it in those terms. I mean, I
think it's fair.
Not that Miller is a big banger, but he is a heavier player. Mm-hmm. He plays, a little bit different game,
and he's versatile.
Yeah. Although I was fascinated. Now I haven't read the column yet, but my boss was telling me about it because about Larry Brooks wrote that the Rangers viewed Miller as being uncoachable.
Well, here's the thing. I'll tell you what my feeling was, and I was at the Garden that day, and I spoke to a lot of people as well, and I know I've been watching Miller all year, right? Here's the thing. Miller, in Cooper's system, will be more physical. I believe Vigneault made Miller cut back on his physical play to match his style more than what Miller is really good at. And as a result, Miller's hockey IQ went way down this year. He made so many mistakes, so many turnovers. But that's why I kept saying in this deal, Miller will do so much better for Tampa under Cooper's system because he will let him be physical. Vigneault didn't want him to be physical.
Yeah,
that's true. Winners. So I wanted to go through my winners real fast, my 5 winners, and see if any of you disagree with them. And I'll just add your own, because I know everybody's been doing winners and losers. And I thought there were a lot of winners in this particular.
Yeah, me too.
I thought there were way more winners than losers. I actually couldn't even put together a three losers type list. But
you got to go into it. I shifted. I did individual players. Like Mike Green was a big loser yesterday.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I have a few teams that were losers.
We'll get to it in a second. But let me try this. So first of all, my fifth was just kind of like a little bit of a cop out, but it was the Ottawa Senators fans, which I actually thought, the possibility that Karlsson could work out somewhere down the line is still alive. Because when you talk to Ottawa fans, I mean, I got so many. Countless emails about fans who no one wanted this to happen. No one wanted Karlsson to go. They all think the ownership could change, which I don't think is possible. But that's But so I do think the Senators fans actually win a little bit, in that whole situation.
Yeah, they bought themselves a couple months.
Yeah, they get a temporary stay of execution. That's what they
right.
get.
Right. No, I can't guarantee that Carlson's going to be traded, but I mean, this quote was from Monday. Pierre Dorian regarding Carlson. Eric and I have a great relationship. Eric and I had a good meeting this morning in my office. He loves being in Ottawa. I think he wants to be a Senator for life. If he is here on July 1st, we will be making him a contract offer. Well, the person in control of the if is Pierre Dorian. So I'm telling you right now, Ak, if they get anything close to an acceptable deal in their eyes for Erik Karlsson, he's gone.
So he's gone. No, I mean, you very well might be true.
Is that news?
It's not news. I'm saying that temporarily.
Not at all.
But here's the other part too, Ak. Do we think this contract offer, even if he's still there, is going to be the best offer Karlsson can get? The answer is no.
Right. And all Erik Karlsson has to do, Ak, is on July 1st say, I'm not signing a contract with anybody, even if I'm traded. And then he screws Eugene Melnyk and the Ottawa Senators because his value just went in the toilet.
Yeah.
I would not.
The toilet. I won't go that far.
Well, not in the. They'll still get something.
They'll get a lot. They'll still get a lot. 1 year of Erik Karlsson, they'll get a lot.
Yes,
they'll still get a ton, and they'll give all kinds of conditions in there if they can re-sign him, that kind of thing. And then, I think it's possible. I think it's still possible. I think it's still very possible.
I actually think there'll be teams that would prefer to get Erik Karlsson for 1 year and not.
Yeah.
That's possible.
It'd just be viewed as the ultimate rental, 1 season.
Right.
Do you think it's rationalization? Because I talked to some people who said that, that Erik Karlsson, who we all think of as one of the top defensemen in the league, but I talked to people who really said, although he is great in Ottawa's system, that he wasn't going to necessarily be great in their system, and that he carries the puck so much that they were afraid that this would affect. I heard this with Tampa. I heard in different situations that they thought this would affect it.
I don't buy that either. I think that's.
I kind of do. I mean, I think the carrying the puck thing I've heard for years now, more often than I thought I would have heard it. If there's one thing that people say behind the scenes a lot is, well, we already have so-and-so wants to carry the puck and so-and-so likes to carry the puck. And if you have too many guys who carry the puck, that can be a problem.
Okay, how about this? Let's say Ken Hitchcock was coaching Bobby Orr. He'd go like, whoa, Bobby. You can't do this. You can't keep going up and down the ice like this. No, come on.
I think that is teams floating disinformation out there to get the price lowered, and I can understand that. But it's the same people who are floating out. Well, he had 30% of his ankle bone shaved off last year. They want to take the price down from the 6 or 7 pieces that Ottawa was asking for, or the ridiculous clause to include Bobby Ryan in the deal. I mean that's just counter to that stuff.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, you're probably right. Number 4 for me was Nashville with Hartman. I thought that was a really good pickup and a really sneaky pickup.
Yeah, that's a trade that the Blackhawks didn't want to have to make, but they had to make it.
Right, and it's a great move for Nashville because they get a guy under control, making less than $1 million this year, young, somebody who can score goals. He's going to be a depth guy on that roster, the third, probably a third line winger. He scored last night. He's a pain in the ass to play against. That's a perfect ad.
Gets 20 goals a year too.
Chicago kid, right?
I don't understand why Chicago felt they had to do that. I
don't think they wanted to give him a long-term deal, Kev, because they can't.
But they didn't have to, really.
Yeah, they didn't have to. Yeah,
they didn't have to, but eventually they would have to. So I think.
Yeah,
that's why.
To me, you're going to make that trade. You end up. He was a late first round pick. Like, they're trying to retool a little bit in Chicago.
Yeah.
And to me, if I'm retooling with Ryan Hartman.
Yeah, I agree. But
now we're getting they're going to get a first round pick that isn't, it's going to be way down just because they got Hartman with the 30th pick, right?
Yeah, it's going to be the same kind of spot.
I just didn't understand that. From the Chicago perspective, I think you let it play out. I mean, most teams have been successful by letting these salary things play out and then figuring out when you get there.
I mean, does that mean in 2 years they're going to do the same thing with Alex DeBrincat because he's coming off his entry level deal?
I just didn't buy the whole, they weren't going to be able to sign him. Well,
especially because
you got to be creative. Why is it that Jim Rutherford can figure out how to put anybody in? And
Hartman, remember, I did doing some research on him. He grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, played for every Chicago Blackhawks mini team you could play for growing up as a kid, loves the Chicago Blackhawks in every which way. How is this going to be a difficult person to sign? Like, to me, he was devastated.
I just think I think whoever's handling their cap looked at this, and this is a ledger of trade. Like, I think they looked at it and said, this is all we can do. We could do this and this and that, but we can't do that with the rest. And so we might as well get as much value as we can.
Well, how much could you possibly ask for?
He scored 20 goals, Kev. I mean, he's going to get $3.5–4 million bucks.
But
he probably, on a bridge deal.
The average salary is getting to the point where it's $3 million.
Right.
Like,
I don't see it at all. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, because here's a kid who loved playing there, who was good there. To me, it almost felt like Chicago every year would trade away their first-round pick, and they just wanted to trade for a first-round pick this year. At
the risk of sounding like my good friend Eklund, my first thought is there something going on there? Is there what kind of? Is there something that we don't know about? Like, so I'm thinking conspiracy.
All right, I'm fine with that. Now number three would be for me. Number 3 was Tampa. Getting the and it could be higher than that, but I still want to see how it all plays out. It's McDonough is obviously a perfect fit, but I want to see it all play out. It could very well be playing out, and I might agree some bias on my number 2 being Mrazek, because of what I've seen happen in Philadelphia in such a short period of time. But I've always said that the one thing you can do to make a team look better and more confident is either change the coach or change the goalie.
Sure, but Mrazek deal was great. I mean, there's no
Mrazek deal for what they gave up. And for the fact that, and I know, Kevin, you know the dark side of Mrazek better than us.
But, sometimes you just change a venue.
Is that a Pink Floyd album, The Dark Side of
Mrazek? Yeah, it's a good one. I like that one.
But I do think
that when you're watching Wizard of Oz, and it's crazy.
Before you completely, tap Ron on the back and give him all the heroes welcome and everything, there is a good chance the Flyers will get to the conference finals, and if they do, that pick turns into a second rounder. So that's. Ken Holland did a pretty good job here too.
Which then it equals the return that Buffalo will get for Evander Kane.
Right.
But you're okay giving up a second rounder if you're in the conference finals.
I get it, but I'm just saying. But
I still don't think there's a good chance the Flyers go to the conference.
But here's the thing. This is the funny thing. This is the mental part now that everybody checks out on. Well, they're in the conference finals, so we're okay with giving up that pick. I mean, that's why Holland put it in there, because he knew the chances are good. That's the whole thing. And once you go into the draft and you don't have that pick and you've lost in the conference finals, you may think differently about that. That's my point.
It depends on if the good Flyers or the bad Flyers show up for the playoffs.
But I'm just saying that's
all over the place, right? So I mean, and for me, but I think Mrazek has already looked. The team already looks more confident in front of him.
Absolutely, because they didn't know what to do night in and night out with their goaltending.
And Elliott had a good year. He made some great saves, but he was not. I felt like you're overselling how good he was playing, especially when you want to tell.
Mrazek's better than Elliott every day of the week.
And Mrazek was, and you don't arrive in the NHL as a goalie until you're like 26 years old, and he was in early, and cast is going to be a superior goalie, and then he went bad for 2 seasons. He killed a couple of coaches.
Yeah,
he alienated teammates. He is a hockey confident, arrogant goalie who believes he's good and plays that way. He lost his confidence and he was a disaster. And he found his way again this season because he was humbled. Everybody passed on him. Nobody wanted him. They couldn't give him away. Came back. He played well this season. And then suddenly there were several teams interested in him. So now he's back being the goalie that he was 3 seasons ago.
Who was your number one?
Number one for me was Broussard, and the Penguins getting Broussard, because I just think if you're a Stanley Cup champion twice removed, and you add like a second line center to play your third line center spot, and somehow with the cap space, Rutherford just said a couple weeks ago, there's no way I'm going to get Broussard. He said that. But this whole thing, obviously, like we talked about before, whatever a GM says comes with an expiration date on it, and he figured out a way to do it.
I'll give one of my thumbs up to the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think Kekalainen did a fantastic job reinforcing his defense, getting Ian Cole, getting Thomas Vanek to help their scoring, getting Letestu for for a fourth-round pick, and that helps them up the middle. I think that plugs a few holes and gives them a little more scoring, and that little more scoring might be the difference between them making and missing the playoffs. And I also have to tip my hat to Ken Holland, because getting a 1 and a 2 and a 3, and I think Tatar is a good player, but I think he was overpaid a little bit. $5.3 million. The contract is, I think it's 3 more years. Getting a 1, a 2, and a 3 is a pretty good return for Tatar, for a team that's obviously on the rebuild.
I want to give you one that's really under the radar. Okay. The really under the radar one was the one that came in at 4:15, Chris Bigra for Ryan Graves. For whatever reason, Graves wasn't getting a chance with the Rangers. I'd seen him play in the Memorial Cup, and he's a really good shot blocker and a decent puck mover. Decent. Yeah. Bigra, in an overage year at 20 goals and as a defenseman in the OHL. But that's, again, he was an overager. But he can skate, and he's a really good, safe defenseman. He's 23.
Yeah.
But they picked up a 23-year-old defenseman that conceivably could go into camp next year and maybe get a bottom pairing spot for a guy that's never even sniffed the NHL. And they got that at the last minute, the very last minute.
And I'm sorry, I have to destroy the New York Islanders. I really do, because the Jason Chimera for Wagner and a third-round pick for Brendan Davidson for a team that is close to being in the playoffs, who needed a goaltender. Robin Leonard was out there. Maybe they could have been in on Mrazek, Chad Johnson. There were a couple goaltenders out there. Garth Snow did nothing. He trades a guy who apparently Chimera hadn't been playing recently, and Wagner is a 13th forward for Anaheim. It didn't answer any of their problems, and you've got this specter of John Tavares leaving. Unless he knows for sure John Tavares is going to stay, I think this team needed to make the playoffs, and I don't think that their chances improved at the deadline. I think they went lower.
No, I don't think they have a chance of making the playoffs right now at all, to be honest, because I think, like you said, Columbus got better and Florida is playing out of their minds. So
I had them among my losers too. I didn't like it either. That not only is the message to Tavares, but what about to the fans?
Yeah.
Oh, the fans are just beyond mad. It's like they're. Yeah,
but I mean, you still gotta, you play this game to try to. You've surrendered way too early.
Yeah.
So
I think the problem is, Kev, when you have a GM that believes that he doesn't want to give up any assets, he doesn't want to give up young talent. Like, you can't work it both ways like that and still have a very competitive team. Yeah. You build assets to get some known players. It's okay to hold on to a certain amount of it, but at some point you have to turn that into something. This was the year they needed to turn it into something with a new owner and a new building coming to create that excitement to get season tickets going again next year for Nassau Coliseum. So this is a huge fail.
And another thumbs down, I think, to Montreal. Now Montreal got a second-round pick for Placanitz and a couple minor leaguers. I'll say that's a good.
That's
return
a pretty good deal, actually.
That's a good return for a guy who I've watched him play 2 games so far. He looks like he's ready to retire, but maybe he's going to retire in Montreal, going back there. But all the news about Pacioretty. And the report is, and there's no way to know whether this is accurate or not, but the report out there was that they were talking to the LA Kings, and their demand from LA was Gabe Vilardi and either Toffoli or Pearson and a draft pick.
Oh my God.
I don't think Rob Blake, if Rob Blake was lobotomized, he wouldn't do that.
I mean, they were talking to Florida for sure to the very end. But that's the only team I really found that I could find, at least, that I don't know. Maybe you heard something else, Kevin. But that Pacioretty,
I think they have to ask for a lot for Pacioretty. I mean, he scored 5 30-goal seasons. Like,
sure, but what they asked for was like way.
Oh, it's too much. But you always shoot for the moon.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was on NHL Network's top 50 players this year. I remember watching the thing, and Pacioretty was one of the top 50. I mean, this is a serious player.
Still a really good player, and actually. He did come out and say, I believe, that he was in a little bit of turmoil because of his family, didn't know what was going to happen. I think he's relieved he wasn't traded. I do. Now, I don't know how.
I kind of thought he probably wanted to be traded just because I just think the pressure's gotten too great there.
I mean, it could be, and that's why he might get dealt in the summer.
Yeah, I think you're right.
A couple people told me that they needed to trade him. That things had gotten really bad, and that they needed to trade him. You rarely hear people say that.
But they've got this. He's such a important player that you've got to get a lot for him. And I don't actually have any problem with them asking for that because everybody knows how this game is played. Anybody that's sold a used car knows how it works.
Right.
You put your car up for a lot of money and more than you think's possible, and then the guy goes, "Well, that's ridiculous." Well, yeah, it is ridiculous, but I got to put it up for that because you're going to come in and lowball me.
Right.
So,
Kev, what did you think of the Nash deal with Boston?
Yeah, I liked it. From the Bruins' perspective, I thought it was the kind of move that the team, will appreciate. Like the one thing about Nash, and Russ knows this to be true, is that teammates appreciate his professionalism, and his defensive play and his all-around game has always been underrated.
Yep.
Nobody talks about it, but that's the type of move when you're playing as well as Boston. You make that kind of move, and they got a lot of guys, but again, they didn't get the one guy like Lindgren. I like him; he'll play in the league, but he's not going to.
Spooner had 2 points in his first game, Kev.
Pardon me?
Spooner had 2 points the first night.
Spooner's everybody knows what Spooner is. Yeah, Spooner can play, but they tried to trade him, and everybody was sort of interested, but they just don't think that he's he can create, but can he?
What if they're wrong?
So well, they might be, but I'm pretty sure the Rangers are going to try to trade him. So
I don't think so. I think when Spooner calms down, I think he's going to like it there. The thing about the Nash deal is watching the Boston game last night, he saved a goal with his defense, so that does always come through. And the way DeBrusk sort of made this amazing defensive play and fed Nash, that's the way Rick Nash is going to score. He's not going to create a lot on his own. You have to have guys create it for him right now. And the Rangers really ran out of those guys when they had injuries. That's the only way you're getting Rick Nash going, and that was a great play.
Well, I'm telling you right now, after watching the third period of the game last night between Nashville and Winnipeg, I'm praying to God that we have that series in the playoffs. But the shame of that will be it'll be in the second round. It won't be in the conference final.
Yeah.
If you look at the potential like second round matchups, they're possibly better matchups than what we might get in the conference finals.
It happens every year, it's like it does. There's always a couple of them that are just like, they're definitely the best. And just because the way it's seeded out, it's just how it goes. And you get.
Well, I'm wondering whether there's an appetite in the league, Kev, to switch.
There's a greater one. Yeah, there's a greater appetite for sure. Yeah. I'm sure that's one of the things that will be talked about at the GM meetings again. Because I think people are a little weary. But here's the thing about all that, and I bring this up all the time because I just find it so kind of fascinating. The reason we're in this mess with these matchups is because when we lost the season, the NHL smartly said, well, while we're sitting around twiddling our thumbs because we can't play hockey because we've locked out the players and we can't get a contract, they did things like, studied how they were going to change the game. That's how we ended up with the shootout and a little more open again and all that. They also surveyed all the fans, the season ticket holders and thinking about what they liked and looked hard at the way fans went to games. And one of the things they noted is, and fans said in their surveys, we like division playoffs. Like they were sold on it. And now what do fans complain about most of the time? So tired of division playoffs.
Been through this so many times,
like
right?
The league, I've talked to league officials who just said, we did it because this is kind of what we felt that we did it the right way. They did a study and not only did fans say this, but if you look at the way they spend their money on tickets, they always go for the division, rivals.
Hey, a couple of years ago, I was at the Rangers Flyers playoff game. I couldn't have been happier. We hadn't seen that matchup in a million years. It was great, and it was a fun series. Yeah. I disagree with any fan. I don't know. Who's going to complain about that matchup?
So this way, Russ, you like that because the Rangers used to kick the Flyers' ass.
No. It really.
But as a fan, I was so happy not to play the Rangers in the playoffs for a decade.
No, but you have to admit it was fun just matching up again.
I agree, but I can tell you, I remember wanting the division playoffs to go away so badly because of the Rangers and Devils. And that's like it really it depends on if you have success with division playoffs or not.
Well, listen, do you want me to bring up Dale Rolfe? I mean, come on. I mean, we're just talking recent memory.
the interesting thing, and we know that like the NHL usually lags a few years behind the NBA. One of the things that Adam Silver in the NBA is promoting as a possible change with them is a 7 through 10 playoff to get the final 2 spots in each conference. To have the 7 play the 10, the 8 play the 9 in a 1 game play-in game, or maybe even a best of 3. And to expand the playoffs basically to 20 teams. And I honestly, when the league expands to 32, and we think it's going to happen with Seattle in the next year or 2, I wouldn't be shocked if that's included, because
Batman has been on the record as saying no. Now, but I disagree with Gary on this.
Yeah, me too.
Because I love it, and I
think the play-in will happen. That's what I think will happen.
I think too they're missing it. I mean, this has been a huge hit, as we all know, in baseball.
Yes.
And you could sell those, would not be in the NBC rights, so you could sell those rights to a different channel. You could experiment with some other situation. You create revenue. Can you imagine how much the tickets will go for a 1-game playoff?
Yeah.
I mean, and I have never bought the argument about, it diminishes the value of the regular season. What's it mean if you play all that and then you lose in a 1 game? Well, what it means is don't put yourself in that position. Everybody understands what it is.
Yeah.
But and you going in, like if you get down in the bottom of those standings, and you're going to have to win these 1-game playoffs. But anybody who's a baseball fan, and I certainly am among those, they love those playoffs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean,
and
baseball went out of their way for so long to have so few playoff games compared to how many regular seasons. Well, this is such a great thing. We got to go soon. I want to make sure I get one more thing from Kevin, though. I really need to know about the experience of covering the women's gold medal game. I mean, was that emotional for you as well?
One of the and people sort of hammered me on this because I've said it was in the it's in the top 15 games I've seen. But folks, I've seen a lot.
Yes,
of games. Like I have seen all the important games over the last 3 decades. The 7 Canada Cup, the 96 World Cup, the Peter Forsberg goal. So for me to say it's in my top 15 is not slighting.
No.
Right.
No.
I just happen to have covered the league a long time. That's all that really means.
Kevin, I'm not the biggest appreciator of women's hockey, but I was enthralled by that game. It was it was the only game during the Olympic hockey tournament, men or women, that I watched from beginning to end, and the overtime and the shootout, especially the move that Lamoureux makes on Spados was incredible.
Yeah, a lot of guys can't do that move.
Yeah. Well, Mitch Marner tried it in a shootout and failed. Yeah.
Here's the thing. I wrote an article after the Winter Classic, interviewed Brianna Decker, and I said, hey, the women's team I felt was the one to watch. And I said, I imagine if they get to the gold medal game, the ratings would be great. They got 2.9 million viewers, which was an NBCSN record from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., which also includes NHL playoff games that happen to run 11 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Well, but Olympics always crush the NHL.
Right, but this is women's Olympics hockey. So that's a big deal.
Bobsled.
I know, but I still think it's a big deal, Kev. I do.
Some of the things. For me, I don't know if this came through there. I'm sure it did, but like the emotion of the whole thing, like I was overwhelmed by it. It was 2 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, I was too.
I'm sitting and I'm bawling on my couch. Like I'm like, that sounds ridiculous to say. But I was like, part of it's just there was so much, that this game is so important to these girls, and that one team has won it so many times in a row, and the other team, and they're sitting there, and my favorite moment was right before the shootout. They went down the benches of both teams, and the girls. Obviously, this is a crazy stressful time. They're going to the shootout of the gold medal game. And a lot of them were really like smiling and just like they had these big smiles, like this is awesome type smiles. And you could tell that they were loving. And I've seen Queen. I was there for the biggest game I ever saw in person was Crosby's 2010 game. When he won the gold medal, I would guess that was the biggest game. And I saw the emotion of the Team Canada, but the emotion of NHL players, it just didn't seem like it was anywhere close to the emotion of these girls playing in the most important game of their lives.
No. Can we go to the dark side here, because it wouldn't be complete if I didn't take it to the negative. Kev, USA, the men's team, I think Russ and I are vindicated based on who were the best players in that tournament for that team were Ryan Donato and, maybe arguably Troy Terry and some of the guys that they brought who played in the Deutsche League or the SM Liga in Finland or the KHL didn't belong there. And I think there were options like Middlestat, like Kachuk, and maybe USA Hockey didn't or couldn't go that direction. But that tournament was wide open, and if they would have brought some young, talented players, I think they would have been, they would have beaten the Czechs and they would have been in the medal round.
Well, I mean, I think their criticism that they, Middlestat, Kachuk, but I'm not sure they would have been in a position. I mean, the one thing that people didn't point out about Donato and Terry is, did you look at their plus minus in that tournament?
Oh yeah,
yeah. I mean, they were on the ice for a lot of goals as well.
Yes,
and
that is a problem in Donato's game. I didn't think that was a big problem with Terry. That opened my eyes a little to Terry's game, but Donato, that's always been a problem.
So the issue was they needed a mix. I think the criticism that is fair is you could have taken a couple of more. I think they felt that some of those guys who were top European scorers were going to score, and therefore they were better. I mean, the guys that held it together in that Czech game were the guys that were the O'Neills, the stuff that were the veteran players. They kept that game close. I mean, that was a quality game. That could have gone either way.
You know what was terrible?
Slater.
Will Borgen did not play a game when they took him out of the system.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody knew their role. Wisniewski complained afterward as well that he didn't get playing time, but he knew going in that that's what was going to happen, that he was going to be the power play specialist.
But Borgen could have gotten a game.
So, I mean, they were fighting for their lives, and
you're right, Kevin. I mean, O'Neill, I thought was fantastic.
Well, I mean, I think it's unfair to say that if you would have taken a team of college players that they would have done better. I don't think so. I mean, that was a hard-edged tournament.
Yeah.
There was very few finishers in that tournament. That's the thing that struck me. When you get over there and the top 700 players are gone in the world, what you realize is that you're just short on finishers. That's why the Russians look so good, because they had some. They had most of them.
Yeah. And how chaotic was the last 5 minutes of the third period between Germany and Russia and the overtime?
Oh yeah. That was a fun game as well. And the one thing about that Russian team, and we'll go back to the American team as well, but I think this is, for those of us who like international hockey, the one thing that's been consistent about the Russians has been their inconsistency in international play. And it's always about politics and picking the right players, or the coach isn't right, or they didn't pick this guy, and it's always messy. And nothing, like if Alex Ovechkin couldn't turn that team around in Sochi and win on Russian soil, it just goes to show you how much pressure there is on that team.
Sure.
But I watched the first game. I wrote a column about this. The first time they played the U.S., how pumped up that team was to beat the Americans. They were totally into this. And a lot of that I felt, and again, who knows, because very few of the Russians would do English interviews, even though several of them could English, chose not to. But I sensed that they were trying to win for Datsuk. He said he didn't care about the Triple Crown, but he cared about winning that gold medal, and Kovalchuk was in the same boat as well. And I think they had the chip on their shoulder, having, not representing their country, being the OR team, the Olympic athlete of Russia. So all that sort of played into it. But that's the first time that I remember when I looked at that team, and they didn't seem to have any cohesive or chemistry issues. Like, they were all on board. This was a very tight Russian team, and they could have. And then getting back to the Americans, they could have easily won that game against the Czechs.
Yeah.
And then they could have been on a path as well. And
there's two things.
He'll hit the post in overtime, right? I mean, he comes down and hits the post in overtime.
There's two things, Kev. Shipashov apparently wasn't happy with his non-playing time with the Russian team, and now he's in the minors. He's in the AHL in the VHL, it's called, in Russia. So that's one thing. And he was demoted yesterday. The other thing is, why did they even bring 3 goalies? Why did they even bother?
Because they have 3 goalies. You know?
I mean, but it's like, why was Sapolsky this guy that they said he's our guy? No matter what, we go to him, and we go to the wall, and we can't change it.
You have to bring 3 goalies because of injury, but what I'm saying, what I think Russ is saying is, why those 3 goalies? Or why wasn't there a goaltender who, if Sapolsky didn't play well, they could have gone to? Maxwell, they only put him in when I think there was an equipment problem where he was dinged for a couple seconds, and then he went right back in. I mean, I could think of 3 or 4 goaltenders that were not NHL contracted players that Merrick Madsen, or the 2 kids in the World Junior, and there was another one that I'm drawing a blank on, but
Well, there's Ottinger and Wall. One of them could have gone, that's for sure. The other thing is the hype was too much for Jordan Greenway for the type of player he is, too. Way too high. Way too high. Way too much hype.
In what regard?
In the regard that they sort of said that he was going to be this, like, greasy in the crease finisher, and he really wasn't, because he didn't have guys that could really get him the puck that way, and he was losing crease battles.
Who was saying that?
Oh, they said that. I read it online. I heard guys
like that. Yeah,
you didn't listen to the broadcast.
It was like there was a lot.
The media was saying that.
Media, yes.
Oh, I see. That's what you're talking about. The US.
No, not the team, but no.
I thought Greenway was very good in the first game, and then I liked his pro potential by watching him play. Like I think. I had no idea that they had converted him to a center at Boston University, and boy, I really like him at center. I think he's going to be hard to play against and all that. And I love the way that he got involved in some discussions, some verbal discussions, and never lost his cool. He was into it with Kovalchuk, and so a lot about him. But he wasn't nearly as important as Donato and Terry, just in terms of creating offense. Those 2 were dynamite. They were, exceptional, players. And I would say, to me, the most important players were on that team were Donato, Terry. I think O'Neill played well. And I'll tell you a guy who they weren't counting on him ended up being their top pairing defenseman, but Billings and Sanguinetti ended up being their very dependable group. And Matt Gilroy, I thought that they thought was going to be their lead guy, was kind of like their second group.
He played a lot.
He was with Noah Welch as well. So
one quick question, and we're getting I'll wait till another show because
I mean, I thought it was. I mean, I was over here. I was the one of the 3 of us who actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed the Olympics, the men's Olympics thing, and I said maybe I'm a little bit of just I love the Olympics. And I didn't look. I tried not to look at it like I'm expecting anything more than it was. I didn't expect this to be the NHL. I didn't expect it to be. I liked the drama of it, and I liked the fact that these guys were getting.
I thought it was terrific. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I didn't even know we were discussing that. But
no, there was a lot when we had some talks here. Because I was getting mocked every time I was bringing it up on the show. But I thought it was fun to watch it. And I thought it, and also, I mean, that was really an emotional. The cool thing about it was Canada winning the bronze medal was emotional for those guys. I mean, that was a chance for them to actually. And when has Canada winning a bronze medal in hockey ever meant anything to anybody?
The thing I would point out is that despite the fact that all the NHL people said, well, we weren't watching because it wasn't any good. The ratings, while lower than Sochi, which was anticipated, were still better than the NHL.
Yeah.
So they did. Apparently, they didn't need Mike and Russ. Just fine without it.
There was an 8. I think the ratings that they said was an 8% drop. Do you think? Do you think that? I mean, first of all, I think the NHL was extremely pleased that the ratings went down.
Well, the ratings were down for the entire Olympics.
Okay,
so it wasn't just hockey. They were just down from Sochi. So
at the time of day, partly plays into that. I mean, it's the worst time zone you can be in. Like it was bizarre to watch a game in the morning that realizing that you guys were going to go to sleep when we were going to watch the game later the same day. It was just a very strange thing. I was trying to always figure out where everybody was over there, as far as
Let me tell you a story about that too, just because I think it's kind of interesting. I do a family blog, and I wrote a family blog while I was there that it goes to some of my friends and family members about my fascination with the Olympics when I was a kid. And I talked about 1964, and I remember watching the games. And what I remember was all the skiing. Billy Kidd, Jimmy Huga, and I have no memories of hockey, even though I was a huge hockey fan even then. And so I wondered about all that. And so I looked it up online and tried to figure out why it is I have all these memories of skiing. And it was right there in the explanation of the 64 Olympics. Any idea how much Olympic coverage we had of the Olympics on television in 1964 for the entire 17 days?
I was a year old, so I don't know.
Yeah.
No,
it was 16 and a half hours.
So less than an hour a day.
Less than an hour a day. But here's the key factor of all that. And I think this is fascinating. The way that the Olympic coverage was done by ABC back then was they would tape, and then they would put the film on a plane and fly it back to the U.S. and then do it in prime time. So now my deductive reasoning, call me Sherlock Holmes here. So what sport starts in the morning at 9 o'clock in the morning and it might be wrapped up by 10:30 or 11? Skiing.
Right. So
they shot skiing, and what doesn't play at 9 o'clock in the morning? Hockey. Plays at night. So they took the skiing, and they said, okay, that's done. Now we'll ship that off, and then they showed me that. So that's why I saw skiing, and I don't have any memories of hockey. At least that's my theory anyway.
Now, Kev, what did you think about? Like, I saw yesterday a lot of criticism coming from the women's snowboarding because the conditions were so bad that the athletes actually were holding back what they could do because they said they would have been shredding their ligaments and breaking bones because they had to. It seemed like they were forced to do this because they had to show something on television. That doesn't look good after the fact,
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So yeah, I don't know enough about it to make
global warming. Fun fact: I actually had dinner with and met Billy the Kid, the skier.
Oh, really? Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah, his Steamboat, Colorado.
He medaled in that 64 games.
Yeah, he's from Steamboat, Colorado. That's where my in-laws had a place. So he was very old, but it was pretty cool. Anyway, it's interesting. Well, great, Kevin. Great to see you. Thanks so much for coming.
Yep.
Back on the show.
Thanks, get some sleep.
Yep. Sounds good. See you later, guys.
See you guys. We'll be back soon. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow.